All right. So let's jump into the content for today for VCIF office hours number 6. The agenda is just some reminders really briefly about managing your grant. Um, Going to just touch on the notice of monitoring as well, which we touched on in the last office hours, but I know some folks maybe weren't there. Then really the most important thing we're going to do today is talk about the new annual report, which is now available for folks to complete. And we'll go over, I'm going to walk you through everything that you have to do to fill out that report. And then we'll end with the next office hours invitation, which is going to be May 30th, and then some announcements and resources for you all. So to get us started, Aaron, do you want to just kind of bring folks up to speed on what they should be doing and need to be doing to keep their grant running?
Yeah, absolutely. Good morning, everybody. My name is Erin Morris. I recognize some names in here, but not all. It's good to be here this morning with you guys. So we're just going to go over a few brief reminders in regards to the requirements of the VCIF fund source. So you have probably heard this ad nauseum, especially if you've been with the grant for its entirety, pretty much over the past year. But just as a reminder, all new project directors and fiscal directors must view the required video linked below within 30 days from the start date of when you begin services on the VCIF fund source or your grant for your agency. So as I said before, most of you have probably already completed this, but if you have not, please be sure to access this link. And you can always contact your specific program manager by email in order to request this. Additionally, you have to email your project management specialist or info.ocjp@tn.gov when you have completed the video. You can also just let us know via phone call or a simple email will do as well. And a good place to start if you might have some trepidation about giving us a call or an email, a good place to start is the OCJP Grants Manual, which is also linked here, and it will also be linked in the chat, by the way. Once the PDF is downloaded, you can actually type in or search words or phrases in order to specifically find what you need. But just know that this is organized by fund source and we have general requirements for each grant. It is kind of confusing because the OCJP Grants Manual encompasses both state and federal funds. So if at any time you get confused or you need clarification, do not hesitate to reach out to your program manager. And another reminder, again, if you've been with the grant for a while, you might have already heard this, but just as a general refresher, the agency must provide written notification to their specific OCJP program management specialist or your program manager within 10 days from the date of occurrence of any change in the designation or contact information of the following individuals. So this would be the authorized official for your agency. Usually this is going to be the mayor or city manager, the project director, and or the financial or fiscal director, as we also call it. Lastly, again, if you have been with this for this fund source for a while, we've talked about this at length. And if you've had a check-in meeting with any of your program managers, you will also have been familiar with this. However, the project directors, all new project directors, have to complete the civil rights compliance training within 90 days of the start date, as well as providing periodic training for the staff. At the end of the online quiz, project director should retain verification of completion in the grant file. The project director and the civil rights compliance officer should complete this training annually. Verification of the training must be retained in the personnel files, and that's generally for your purposes. It is the responsibility of the project director to maintain documentation demonstrating the required civil rights training has been completed annually. And I will say that if you have done this for a previous fund source, then that will also suffice. And since this is a requirement annually, if you did this at the very beginning when your agency first got the executed VCIF contract, that should still be in effect at this point. And now we will open up for questions of any variety. And again, if you don't feel comfortable coming off mute here or submitting your question in this kind of public format, you can always shoot us an email or give us a call after the meeting.
Thanks, Aaron. As she said, we'll be taking questions throughout, so feel free to type them and we'll keep going with the presentation. This is a function of all OCJP grants monitoring the contract. With VCIF, we are starting a new type of monitoring. If you've experienced monitoring with an OCJP contract before, it will look very different for the VCIF grant for the most part. What we're calling it is point-in-time monitoring, or PIT monitoring. This is a requirement for every single contract that OCJP has. And so this will have to happen for all contracts ending in FY24 within the next several months. If your contract ends in FY25, it will also need to be monitored. And so we might monitor it in the next couple of months, or it might happen next fiscal year. But either way, you'll want to be on the lookout for a notice of monitoring email from our office. Most likely it will come from your project management specialist, but it might come from someone else. So just be aware that if you see a notice of monitoring email, that's something to pay close attention to. This is a screenshot of what it will look like, just to draw your attention to a couple of items. It's going to specifically mention the contract that is being monitored. It's going to specifically include an invoice, which is the basis of the monitoring. So when we come to look at your contract, we're not going to be looking necessarily at the entire contract and everything that you did this fiscal year. We're just going to be looking at one or maybe a couple of invoices that you submitted. And the pretext for that is that we can monitor contracts as soon as you reach that 10% threshold of invoicing against your budget. So obviously, many of you are well past the 10% threshold, but that is what triggers the monitoring. And so this invoice here is the other thing that you'll be paying attention to, as well as the contract number. And then what you'll do with that is you'll click on this link to complete a monitoring form, and there will be a deadline given to you, usually within 15 days of the email, to complete this form. A couple of things to note. All this will be done online. You will fill out a form online. There are going to be very, very rare instances where we have to do a more in-depth monitoring, but for most of you, if you just have equipment as a part of the VCIF grant, which many of you do, this will all be done by filling out a form online. It will be due, again, 15 calendar days after the notice is sent by email. You're only going to be discussing in this monitoring expenses that were included on the invoice that we send you. And then from your end, the things that you'll have to submit are that invoice, your purchasing policy, any evidence of bids or quotes if they apply to what you had to purchase, receipts or proofs of purchase. That will include a worksheet that we'll ask you to complete as a part of this online form, and then photos of equipment over $500. So all these things you can be prepared to supply for the monitoring. You will not be expected to just go once we send you the email. There are very clear instructions that we have created that are accessible on our FundSource chapter that Aaron mentioned earlier. There's a QR code here that will take you to our FundSource chapter, and there are 2 videos. We'll also send them to you in that email about how to complete the monitoring form and how to complete the worksheet that will accompany that form if you have equipment expenses. This is not something you need to do. I want to be very clear. You do not need to do this until we contact you. This is just a kind of heads up that this is coming, and it will happen for most of you in the next couple of months. But please do not go and complete any form or do any of the stuff that we're talking about right now until you receive that email that triggers the monitoring. So we could talk a lot more about monitoring. I do want to refer to our last office hours meeting where we talked about this a little bit more. And so if you do have questions, you're welcome to ask them now, but there will be time for monitoring questions also later. Just gonna check the chat real quick to see if we have any questions. Doesn't look like we do. Saudi Daisy, y'all are clear. Good. Thank you. Thank you for speaking up. Well, let's move on, and then if questions occur to you, we can address them as we keep going. The annual report. this is the big kahuna, I would say. The annual report will be due within 1 month of the end of the fiscal year. So it will be due Thursday, July 31st. You must complete a separate report for each contract you have, each VCIF contract you have with funding in FY24. So some of you have a collaborative grant and a formula grant. In that case, you need to submit 2 separate annual reports if those grants have funding in FY24. Some of the contracts had 0 funding in FY24 and all your funding was in FY25. Some of you have completed an amendment to your contract that moved all of your money from FY24 to FY25. If that's the case and you have no funding in FY24, you do not need to complete an annual report. This is only for activities that occurred in FY24. The annual report can be found here at this link. It can also be found by using this QR code. And then Kate just dropped a link to the annual report in the Teams chat. As well, we will email out this information for those of you on the phone or for those of you who can access the report this way. We will send out a link to the report. Once you have completed your grant activities, you can complete the annual report. You do not need to wait until the end of the fiscal year. You can get a head start on that, again, if you're done with all your grant activities. We have a question in the chat, which is, can we submit the annual report and closeout report together? So this annual report will be the only report that you have to submit setting aside quarterly reports that are for very select agencies. You only need to submit an annual report for the VCIF grant. So we are kind of folding in what would it be considered a closeout, if you will, into this annual report. This annual report covers everything that you need to do for the VCIF grant. There are going to be some other kind of compliance related tasks that you might have to complete. We mentioned one already, monitoring. Another one will be the civil rights compliance to make sure that you completed the civil rights requirements that Aaron talked about earlier. Those are separate and not part of this report. But if you've done any other reporting with OCJP grants in the past, this VCIF is different. There is not a closeout report. This is the report. And I'm going to show you what's included in that here in a little bit. Another question in the chat is, does the contracting agency on the collaborative grant submit the annual report on it? We are the subrecipient agency. So the lead agency, that's a great question. The lead agency will be the agency that submits the annual report. So we will only be, you should only be submitting one report for collaborative grants, and it will be the lead agency that has the contract with the state. So I'm going to actually pull up the annual report and we can go through it section by section. And then when I send you guys this the slides, it will have this kind of walkthrough that we're going to do right now in each slide. So let's look at the report together. It is on a website called FormStack. You've probably used it before. This is where you did your intent to apply. This is where you will do the monitoring. So this is a website you should be familiar with. Just a thing to note up here is that you can save your progress as you go along. You do not need to do it all in one sitting. The way to do that is to scroll all the way to the bottom and click on Save and Resume Later, and it's going to generate a link for you that you'll have to save and keep that link, and it allows you to access the report progress for 30 days. So I'll go through each section. I'm not going to spend too much time on section 1, except to show you that there's only one option for this reporting period is this present fiscal year, FY24. So you can't mess that one up. And then you'll have to choose between collaborative and formula grant. So again, if you have 2 grants, you need to complete this form twice, and each time you'll select the one that you're completing it for. This report covers the entire fiscal year. Unlike what we talked about before with monitoring, where we're going to send you an invoice, right? And you're just going to tell us kind of what you did related to that invoice. The annual report is for all the activities in fiscal year 24, starting July 1st, ending June 30th. So that's why I would say only if you've completed all your activities should you complete this report now. Otherwise, you have a month after the end of the fiscal year to complete it. You're going to complete the implementing agency name. So this will be the sheriff's office or the police department, the name of the person completing the report, phone number, email address. Email address is very important because once you submit, you're going to get a copy of your report sent to this email address. So just make sure that this is accurate and going to an email address that you are checking. And then the last question in section 1 is asking if the project generated income during the reporting period, during fiscal year 24. This should in all cases be no. So if you're going to answer yes, there's going to be another report that pops up that you'll need to complete, but this should not be the case for any agency. If it is, please reach out to your project management specialist because we want to make sure that kind of we're clear on how this happened because none of these grants should be generating any income for your agency. So again, the answer will be no here. You move on to section 2. Section 2 can be completed by checking your contract scope, section B. Section B has that kind of logic model content in it, and it has goals, objectives, and activities. What this question is asking for is progress towards the goals that you set up at the beginning of this grant. So what you'll do is you'll come down to this one question here, and you'll use these arrows to select how many goals you listed. A lot of you only listed one goal. In that case, you can just put 1, and it will generate goal 1 progress, goal 1 barriers. These are narrative questions that you have to complete for each goal. So these are required questions. You don't need to write a ton, but we're just looking for you to kind of tell us how things went for your project. For each goal you have in your contract scope in section B, you'll choose that number, and you'll have goal 1, progress and barriers, and then below that you'll have goal 2, progress and barriers. Okay. So simple enough. All these are required questions for the number of goals. This is a required question, but you should not, there is a minimum of 1 for this answer. So you can't put 0. This won't let you fail this question. So that is section 2. Again, very straightforward, just some narrative questions about how you did and what kind of got in your way. Section 3, this is probably where you're going to spend the most time in the annual report. This is asking you to check section E of your scope document, where you listed all the things that you were going to count for the project. A lot of you listed the equipment that you were buying, right? And that's kind of what you should be tracking as an output for this project. This is only asking about this fiscal year. So just be careful, because section E, both section B and section E, right, talked about the entire course of the grant. So for section B, if you have 3 goals, but you only work towards one of them this fiscal year, and you moved money for the other goals into fiscal year 25, for example, you might say, we were able to purchase this equipment, and the barrier was that it got more expensive, and so we had to find a new vendor. Goal 2, maybe you didn't make any progress towards that goal, and you can say, we attempted to purchase this equipment. However, we had to move the money into FY24, or excuse me, into FY25. And so we did not complete this goal this fiscal year, right? That would be a perfectly reasonable response if you did not do the activity for section 2. For section 3, we're really only looking for what you actually accomplished this fiscal year. Okay. So whatever you have in section E of your scope document that you did this fiscal year, that is what you will put for when you're checking the boxes to say what you did. So we have here a list of possible outputs that you put in your scope in section E. Most of you will answer equipment. So I'm going to select that one and we'll look at that together. But you can see that there are also salary, staff trainings, trainings that you provided to others, community engagement events, investigations enhanced by VCIF funding. So we wanted to increase our homicide investigations, things like that, hotspots, and other violent crime statistics. Every time you select one of these, there's going to be conditional logic that reveals more questions beneath. So let's look at equipment together. The equipment checkbox has kind of two sections that you need to be mindful of. One is the final inventory worksheet. So this is going to ask you to put down on your worksheet everything that you bought with VCIF funds. The worksheet is linked here, and you'll click this and it's going to download in a new tab to your downloads folder. And so when you open your folder up, you'll see a worksheet that looks like this, and I'll pull it up here in a second. So it's going to ask you again to complete. Looks like we need to fix this, guys. I'm sorry about that. Oh no, I'm sorry. This is blank. So you'll fill in these sections here with who the agency is, who you are, completing this contract number, etc. You're going to affirm this language here that everything is accurate, and then you're going to list all the equipment that you purchased. Every one of these columns is a required column that you need to fill out. There are instructions on this tab about how to complete each of those sections, and there's a sample as well in the last tab of this Excel document that shows you how you might fill out this document. So we do need the description of the item, if it was assigned serial numbers or not, when you purchased it, where it resides. So this could be at the precinct. It could be an address. It could be a county if equipment was distributed, right? So this just tell us kind of where this is. And again, there are instructions about how to complete that. Rough description of building, site, or address where the item resides, what condition it's in, how much it cost per unit, how many units you bought. And then this last column will automatically calculate based on what you put here in numbers of units and cost per unit. And then the last question, and this is for agencies that have collaborative grants. So if you aren't filling this out for a collaborative grant, you don't really need to worry about this. But if you passed equipment to a partner agency, you're just going to tell us how many units out of the ones that you bought, you passed. So maybe you bought 60 radios and you passed 35 of them onto a partner agency, then that's how you would complete that. And you're just going to tell us who the partners are that receive that equipment. There will be an additional certification that we'll need to get at some point, but that is not part of this annual report. So once you fill this out, obviously some of you have a lot of equipment that you bought this fiscal year, and so this will take quite a while. You can always add more more rows to this table just by typing here. And then you can add more rows as well by inserting rows. Once you complete this and save it, you're going to come back to this form and you're going to upload that file back into this form. So you download it here and then you upload it right here. One option for you is that you can upload your own document if you already have this listed, as long as it contains all that information. Okay. So if you already have a list of the equipment you've purchased because you've been doing your due diligence and you've been, cataloging everything as it comes in and you have that information, you can just upload that document for us. If you have questions about that, reach out to us and we can kind of talk about if the format's okay or, what other questions you have. But you can also see that there's another upload option here. And so if you have a list of equipment, but it's missing some of that information, like maybe it's missing the serial numbers or it's missing the cost per unit or something like that, you can upload another document here that tells us that information. I think the easiest thing probably is to just have it all in one document, but we can talk about how to make this easiest as possible for you guys, because I know it's a lot to be typing all that equipment, especially if you have really long lists of equipment. So that's the first big piece of this equipment, this section 3 for equipment. The other section that you'll have to complete is this kind of checklist for the marquee items that many people, many agencies bought, because we're trying to keep tabs on how many specifically of these items were purchased. So in addition to filling that out in the inventory worksheet or in whatever worksheet you upload, you're also going to do this checklist if you purchased any of these specific items. But the list, it's not exhaustive, but these are the items that we're paying most attention to. So you can check as many as you bought, and then you'll scroll down, and for each one, you'll just type the quantity that you purchased. Okay. So that's the equipment requirement for the annual report. Something to note is if you purchased equipment and you had other outputs as well, like you hired hired staff, or you were targeting hotspots. If you check all of these, just be mindful that they will appear below in the order in which they're listed here. So you'll have first your equipment stuff, you'll check these boxes, those things, and then the outputs will appear, but these will appear kind of below in a new section. So it's a little bit tricky here. If you have other outputs as well, just know that you'll have to scroll through and make sure that you're answering all these questions for all the specific equipment outputs that you check. These other output categories do have some questions as well. So if you hired staff, we're asking about number of FTE positions, number of hours funded, number of overtime hours funded. This is the same question. So if you had, scroll back up here, either salary or overtime, you'll check this box here. And if you didn't hire anybody, you can just put 0. If you didn't have any overtime, you can just put 0, but you do have to answer all these questions here. If there is an output that isn't listed here, we have an other section, and you would just type what the output is and how many of the output that you listed you achieved during fiscal year 24. That is again the most time-consuming part of this report will be most likely the equipment output category. So just be mindful of that when you're going in. You can come in here, you can skip all these questions, right? Come straight to the equipment one, click that, download that worksheet and get started on that. And then you can come back and complete the rest of this, just so you're not like sitting here with this open, trying to do the whole worksheet and then upload it all in the same sitting, right? So that would be my recommendation, would just be to come here, download this worksheet, work in that, and then you can complete the rest of the report. The last section for most of you will be this VCIF impact, section 4. It is just a series of, I think, four Likert scale questions about the impact that the VCIF funding had for your community. And then this last question is an optional question. So if you want to tell us a little bit more about how this benefited your community, what obstacles were with implementing this funding, we'd love to hear from you as well. We'd love to hear your feedback. But this is an optional question. You do not need to complete this. For the collaborative contract reports, there will be an additional section at the very end, which has 3 narrative questions. It's asking, describe the role that each partner law enforcement agency played in your collaborative project. Describe any partnerships with nonprofit partners. And then describe any obstacles that you or your partners faced with implementing this project. Some of you have collaborative grants with 0 partners. So it's okay for you to then say, we did not have any partners on this grant, or NA, just you will have to type something here because this is a required question, but you can just tell us that you didn't have partners and that's fine. These questions are 1,000 character limit. So that's about, I think, 5 to 6 sentences. We're not asking you to type a lot here. We just need to hear kind of general feedback on how the project implementation went. So that is the annual report.
Ben, we have a question in the chat.
Thank you, Jackie.
Can you review what type of reporting will be required for trainings that we've attended? Will we need to reference hotel costs, per diem, and/or mileage?
Yeah, great question. So we have staff trainings here as one of the options. All we're asking for in this annual report is number of staff trained and number of training hours. That's all you have to report on with the annual report. There is also the option of staff trainings that you provided to other agencies. And so with that question, it would be number of individuals trained, number of training hours, and the names of the trainings that you provided. The question about hotel costs, per diem, and mileage, those expenses will need to be shared, but that's during monitoring. So when we monitor your contract, we will be sending you the invoice that you submitted. And so if you had training costs in that invoice, we'll then ask you to report, or you'll be asked to report on the form online, whether you followed the requirements for per diem, the limits set for costs, and you'll be asked to share the proofs of those purchases, that you attended those trainings and that you did that, use those per diem expenses. So that will be part of monitoring. That will not be part of the annual report. Great question. Any other questions on the annual report?
Can you just tell us once again, Ben, they'll get this by email and?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, this will be sent out via email. And then also I have the FundSource chapter pulled up here. So all past office hours slides and recordings, if they're available, are posted here. So this number 6 one will be posted right here. And then we'll also put a link to the annual report here in the reporting and compliance requirements. So currently there's no link here, but we'll add one once at the conclusion of this, once we have a chance to update the website. So you can come to the FundSource chapter to find those links as well, and to find this video. Another question in the chat, looks like, will funds spent in FY23 need to be referenced? No. So if you had funds in FY23, we had an FY23 annual report. And so there were very few agencies that had those funds in FY23, and you would have completed an annual report already for all those activities. So this is purely for FY24 activities starting July 1st and going through June 30th. Yeah, and that's why this option is only for, FY24 here. I'll just scroll through here again just so you guys can see what's on here, and maybe it'll trigger some more questions. But yeah, overall, this is nothing that I don't think was anticipated. We're only asking for you to report on activities during this reporting period. You can refer to your scope to see what you intended to do, right? And then this is just saying, did you do what you intended to do? So you'll be putting in, again, and if I didn't say this, I apologize, but for when you're filling out the outputs and you purchased body cameras, you're going to put the number that you actually purchased, not the number that you maybe said you would purchase in the scope. It's okay if those numbers are different, or that that you said you would do in the budget. It's okay if what you actually did is different from what you had intended to do. What we are trying to collect right now is what actually occurred.
And I have another quick question, Ben. This is can be a lot of information, especially with the attachment. Do they need to do this all at once, or can they save this and come back to it? How does that work?
Absolutely, yes. So you can complete any part of this report and then pause, scroll down here to the bottom and click save and resume later. Are you sure you want to leave this form? Save and get link. And then here's your link right here. So you'll copy that for your own records. You can also type your email address here and it will send you that link. So when you do that, it does take you away from the form. So, just make sure you then complete this process and actually get your link. Because, sometimes the back button on your browser might malfunction or it might take you back to a blank form, right? So just make sure if you click save and resume later, get this link and don't be like, oh, whoops, actually, I want to go back and do it. And, it looks like that might mess you up, right? So just make sure that you are ready to save when you're done, get that link, and then you can always come back here, or rather get that link and then paste it in your browser. But no, this is not, we don't expect that it'll be completed in one sitting. There's likely too much information for you to generate and to report on. It looks like we have another question. As I inherited this grant after the FY23 annual report was submitted, I do not have a copy of that report in the grant file. Will I be able to obtain a copy for my file? Yeah, that we can absolutely do that. Thank you for trying to make sure your file is complete with all this information. You can definitely email, is it Bradley County? We can send you your FY23 annual report if we have one for you. Off the top of my head, I'm not recalling about Bradley County, but if we have your annual report, we will send it to you. And make a note of that. We have another question here. When will the recording of this meeting be posted for me to review? We have to go through a process of getting it posted to YouTube, and then we get the link, and then we post it on our website. So that can take a couple of days. We'll try to get it this week, but hopefully it'll be posted by next week. So, yep. Here is the annual report again. Any other questions, please feel free to reach out to us. We'll be happy to answer them and even walk through the report with you side by side if you want. So we definitely know this is a lot, and we appreciate your guys taking the time to do this. I'm going to go back to our slideshow. We can continue on. So as you can see here, here's screenshots of everything we just went over in this training, and you'll be able to access this for visual aid as you're going through. Once you submit the report and you put your email in at the top in section 1, you'll be getting a copy of all your answers here in an attachment and in the body of the email. So this is your indication that you actually did submit the grant. If you don't get this email, reach out to us to make sure that you actually submitted the report. Okay. Before we move on from the report, any last questions for now? Okay. And Kate, again, just dropped the link for that annual report in the chat if you want to go ahead and pull it up and get started. So closing out today, just a couple of reminders. We will have another office hours on May 30th from 1 to 2. It's a Thursday. I'll send out, or someone will send out a link to that meeting by email. This will be a more general questions office hour, so there will not really be, at this point, I don't foresee any specific agenda or any topic to train on. We'll just kind of have open time for people to come ask questions if they want to. We wanted to share with you guys a federal funding announcement that we learned about recently. This is from the Bureau of Justice Assistance, and it is a funding opportunity for rural and small departments to address violent crime. It was posted on March 19th, and it will be due May 22nd. So you have about 3 weeks to work on this application. Kate, if you look in the chat, there's a link to it, and you can also go to this QR code here to go to where it's posted. You do need to register at grants.gov by May 15th to be able to apply, and then the application will be done on the Just Grants platform. The funding is specifically for city or township governments and county governments, as well as Native American tribal governments. The specific targeted applicants, they're specifically targeting, I should say, applicants that are small agencies, so agencies with less than 250 sworn officers, or rural agencies, which they have a 2-part definition for. So it has to be outside a standard metropolitan statistical area, or it has to serve one or more rural census tracts. So these are the agencies that are defined as smaller rural agencies, and then a tribal agency must be a federally recognized tribe with a designated law enforcement agency. So highly recommend you guys go check this out. We know it's sometimes a burden on smaller agencies to apply for these grants, so BJA will have some resources for you to be able to assist you with applying. For the VCIF grant, if you're still struggling to hire for VCIF funded positions, we do have this resource here where you can post law enforcement jobs. There are several job aggregator platforms that are listed on this resource. So even if you just want to be able to access this for the future, we highly recommend you go here and download this. That's something that Kate put together. And then we are also trying to work on compiling some training ideas for next fiscal year for you all. We know a lot of agencies have struggled this year to implement training funds that were in their budget. And so we want to be able to share training opportunities widely. So if you did attend a training that was really awesome, that you thought, hey, I think a lot of these other agencies that are neighboring counties or neighboring governments would really benefit from attending some trainings, please send them to us and we'll compile them and then send them back out. This is a great way to kind of share knowledge across the state of Tennessee. So we would really appreciate if you guys would take the time, if you have if you've had really good experiences in trainings, please send them to us. You can send them to info.ocjp@tn.gov. Another plug for our TA provider, University of Tennessee Law Enforcement Innovation Center. They also have ideas for trainings, and so we're working with them on compiling that training list. But so if you are needing ideas, you want to talk through what trainings might be appropriate for your agency, or you just need to, bounce some ideas off someone, please reach out to Rhiannon Jones, who's the program manager there. She is almost 100% dedicated to the VCIF grant and to working with you all. So she's a great resource. They can also help with model policies and procedures if you did anything new this year with VCIF funds or in general. And they have template resolutions for county commission meetings, things like that. So they're a great resource. They have a training calendar as well, which I'll talk about here in a little bit. Here's Rhiannon's contact information. And here is the QR code for their website. These links are also in the chat. There were some trainings that UT was hosting that did get canceled, unfortunately. So the ones that were coming up in Sevierville and Mount Juliet, those were in July and August, have been canceled, but everything else is still on the calendar. So we still do have some trainings, crime scene operations trainings coming up in May and June. Field training officer trainings coming up in, there's actually one going on starting yesterday, and then one early June in Sparta, and then criminal investigations training in July in Germantown. If you are interested in these trainings, please reach out to, again, Rhiannon Jones, who is the liaison over at UT. Then there is human trafficking training. This one, there should be more coming soon, but this one starts tomorrow. So it's in Denmark, Tennessee. If you're interested in this one, definitely call Rhiannon today. I'm not sure if there's still availability, but if you are interested, please don't hesitate to reach out. These trainings are, again, all free for all TN Tennessee law enforcement agencies. You do not need to be a VCIF grantee to access these trainings for free. So with that, I think our office hours is complete. We'll ask, just lastly, if you guys don't mind doing this brief satisfaction feedback survey. It really helps us make sure that our offerings are relevant and useful for you guys. So if you go to this QR code or go to that link and select VCIF office hours, just fill out this quick survey. It takes like 2 minutes. It really helps us, again, improve and be better, and that helps everybody. So with that, I'm going to stop the recording.